Hi, I'm Eric Gadby, and I have been an enthusiast for all things nautical and aerospace since the age of 10. I served for 22 years in the U.S. Submarine Force and have been supporting it for the last 15 years since retiring. Join me as I pursue my passion for first-person context for ships, aircraft, and historic sites that have shaped our world, as well as some that are off the beaten path. Welcome to Roy, Utah, just north of Salt Lake City and home to Hill Air Force Base and the Hill Aerospace Museum. This is part 3 of a personally guided tour of the museum with Lieutenant Colonel Mark Hasara, U.S. Air Force retired, call sign Sluggo. Mark is a former KC-135 pilot, the author of the best-selling book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, public speaker, host of the Lessons from the Cockpit show on YouTube, and is a small business owner of Wall Pilot, custom aviation graphics. In addition to all of these, Mark is a great friend and mentor.
Yeah, they made this. The two-seat version of this was the first Wild Weasel, and they were carrying rocket pods and bombs. Not real successful. But believe it or not, the first SAM site kill,
High risk, high reward,
was a F-100F. Okay? Al Lamb and Jack Donovan. Al Lamb and Jack Donovan were the first two Weasel guys to fly an F model and get the first SAM site kill. But they said, we gotta figure out a better way to do this because they're having to get too close to everything. You know, this thing is just built for frickin' speed. You know, as an interceptor, built for speed, goes really fast.
and it was incredibly unforgiving.
Incredibly unforgiving, okay? And there's a famous story, and a lot of air forces in Europe bought these things and were flying them. And the greatest ace that will probably ever live or be on this planet, Eric Hartman, with 352 confirmed aerial victories, made a lot of noise about do not buy this thing because it's killing people. And he was right, but they didn't listen to him. And there's a lot of German pilots there's a lot of pilots, period, that lost their lives from flying this airplane in many different air forces. And it flew in a lot of air forces, Greek, Japanese, German, you know, Italian, everybody was flying that thing, you know, because as you can see, it's engine and fuselage, and that's about it. And it's just extremely fast.
Such a fast and steep approach.
Yeah. And you can see by the wings, you know, the approach speed on this thing is like 160 knots. You know, I mean, it's way up there. Believe it or not, Eric, my uncle was the top student in his class, and this is the first airplane he flew out of Clark Air Base in the Philippines. Okay? The 509th, the 510th fighter spotter. All right. And he said this was a real beast to handle. You know, and you can see the missiles, you know. It's a great interceptor, you know, carried the Falcon missiles, and you can see it's got unguided rockets in it too. You know, he loved flying this airplane, but he said it was a tough airplane to fly.
And then it was the Genie.
The Genie, which we'll see down there. Or is that one? Yeah, there's one right there.
The nuke.
Yeah, the nuke. I think there's one down here. But he said it got a lot better when they got what was called the Case-X wing. And this is the wing that has the fences on it. All right.
Yeah, now, at McCord, they have a 102 and a 106 sitting right next to each other. Yeah. And you can immediately do the compare and contrast.
Yeah, the 318th Fizz. We'll walk by there's a 106 back here. Now, believe it or not, there were still guard units flying this when I came into the Air Force. All right. And their depot maintenance was done here at Hill when I was going through school. And I remember being out at the end of the runway when one of these took off. It had, without a doubt, Eric, the loudest burner light I've ever heard. I mean, it was bang, when it went into burner. It was so loud. I mean, you hear it across the base, you know? And let's go around this side and I'll talk about this other airplane here in a minute. But this was America's primary interceptor for a long time with the 106. And it carried, you know, weapons up here in pallets underneath here. That's why you see this big strake here. When I was a kid in high school, there was a TWA pilot that was a member of our LDS ward, and this is what he had flown. And he loved it. He said it was a great go-fast airplane. He says, but man, when you fire that stupid Genie off this thing, it literally blanked out the sky in front of it. It was so smoky when that thing went off. And
the Canadians, they used it as well.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
They had the CF-86s and the CF-101s.
Yeah, and they loved them. They loved them. First use of that bomb was Desert Storm, and the same one here. And that one. That was mines. F-111s and F-16s were carrying these. This is the new one, though. This is the really incredible one. This is called the sensor fused weapon. You see all these little skeets down here? See the back of them? There's an explosive charge behind that, shaped charge, okay? And you can see from the picture up there, and if you go online and go to YouTube and put in CBU 105, you can see lots of these things. But see the little dimples around the outside? It makes it into little mini balls like this. Yes. So it goes after tanks and vehicles, but also, you know, troops and things like that too. Yeah, and it's GPS guided, all right? And the first time we used one of these was in the Iraq 2003 shock and awe campaign. Yeah, that's, and amazing weapon.
The copper plate on it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that the Iraqis would use to make the explosively formed penetrators.
Yeah, yeah.
Just take a sheet of copper and then shape charge behind it, and then suddenly you've got a slug of molten copper moving at 30,000 feet per second.
We called the weapon the succession of miracles, you know, because the things come out, there's a little parachute that drops them, the canister spins up, throws the things out, then the little skeets spin up, they have an infrared sensor on them, and they tilt and everything, you know, and look at things. But yeah, we called it the succession of miracles weapon. But guess what? It worked every time. And you know, you can see here the wind-corrected munition dispenser, and this again allowed the weapon to be steerable. And so the first time we used them, this is a great story. It was off of a B-52. Yeah, it wasn't off a fighter plane, it was off a B-52. So they get this new weapon and everything, the B-52 guys get all trained on it and everything like that, and they take off out of Diego with a bunch of these on them. And they're up around Baghdad, south of Baghdad, when a Marine unit has like 40 to 60 vehicles coming on top of them, you know, and they're screaming for help. And the B-52 is the first one that comes up and says, hey, we can help you. We got this new bomb, CBU 105. Of course, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller, the ETAC, has no idea what he's talking about. The B-52 guy tells him, oh, you're gonna love this, just hang on. He says, where do you want them? And he says, are they GPS guided? He goes, yeah. And so they see the convoy and everything, and they figure it out, how to plot them. And like I said, I think there's like 70, something like 70 vehicles, all of them loaded with men, material, all kinds of stuff. And the B-52 drops them. And of course they spin up, and then the little fingers of God come out, you know, the shaped charge, explosive charge, and everything like that. The ETAC, the Marine ETAC goes, oh, like that over the radio, all right? And wipes out the convoy, you know, the first portion of the convoy. And the Iraqis' convoy comes to a halt, and they all get out with waving handkerchiefs going, I don't know what that was, but we won't like it. and they give up, and the Marine group has to start calling other groups to come help them because they can't handle all the prisoners and everything. But
yeah, that's not the problem they were expecting that day.
that's not the problem they were expecting that day, you know? Not the problem they were expecting. Anyway, that's one of the first laser-guided bombs up there. Not like the ones we used, though. Oh, we're going to turn around and look at those here in just a minute. That's the actual bunker buster warhead right there, the BLU-109. That's the hard target warhead penetrator. And you can see by the nose, you know, it's very sharp, made for going through. And that other one is the runway denial weapon called Mata Durandal. You know, and I don't know if we used it. I know 111s could carry it, but I don't know if we've ever dropped them in anger.
Okay, that's
This is one of the very first precision-guided weapons, GBU-8, called HOBO, and it just stands for Homing Bomb. And it was used in Vietnam, and it was kind of the forerunner of the next one over, which is the GBU-15. They're both 2,000-pound Mark 84 bomb bodies on both of these. They have a pod that was the data link pod for driving it, for steering it. And then the next one over is a GBU-24, 2,000-pound bomb. Now, you see the fins on this thing, they're huge. And the F-117s had a different version of this with a different tail assembly so that it could fit up in the weapons bed, but it's basically the same bomb and weapon, except for the tail assembly. And the next one in, as you see, is a GBU-12, and that's the one bomb we use like crazy. It's 500-pound, laser guided, and it's a great bomb. We've dropped those things by the tens of thousands. Yeah, I did. For a long time, this was the weapon of choice, AIM-9 Mike. You can see all the guts of the seeker head, and of course the warheads back there. This is a later version of it. Those back there are AGM-45 Shrikes. Those are the first anti-radiation missile. We're going to look at our F-4G Wild Weasel. They would carry two of these on the outboard wing stations. And then you have the AMRAAM, the Advanced Medium Range Air Missile. This is the missile that airplanes are carrying now, the M120s. All right? And you see another Shrike. But this is a whole group of AIM-7s. This was the latest one we used right here, the M model right here. Those are all like Vietnam era, and how you can tell is on the fins you see the black stripe, and the newer ones have the dark gray fins, like this one. Okay, but these AIM-9 or AIM-7s, this was the weapon that was used during Desert Storm, the radar guided missile that they were using in Desert Storm. Yeah, crazy, man. That was the first thing.
based on your recommendation, I read both of Jack Broughton's books.
Oh my gosh, aren't those great? Yeah, they're just amazing. This airplane is painted in the markings of a very famous P-47 pilot from World War II who became a wing commander at Doc Lee. His name is Paul Douglas. And he had eight kills during World War II, which they painted on the side of the airplane. But he flew 100 missions, you know, in F-105s. Yeah, pretty wild.
That's insanely insane.
Yeah, it is. Here's that Genie rocket we were talking about. This is I believe was the nuclear version of it.
Yeah, to have a formation of bears coming over the horizon? Send it to the middle of the horizon,
That's
or
what
send it to the middle of the formation.
And this airplane could carry like 2 or 3 of them. This is a 106. This was the Air Force's primary interceptor through the 60s and 70s.
It's
Has the really
still the fastest single engine.
Yeah. And there's a really funny story about this. They actually had a pilot that lost control of it and ejected, and the airplane recovered and just made a nice glide landing into a field in Montana. They jacked the airplane up, took it to the depot, fixed it, and it flew again. But I've actually refueled these. The guard unit, or actually an active duty unit at Griffiths in the 1985-1986 time frame, was still flying these things. And they actually got to refuel them, which was really cool. It was really cool to see these airplanes, you know, F-106s out on the wings. The fuel receptacles up on the top. This is the first crack at a stealth cruise missile, air-launched cruise missile. This is the famous one you always hear about. This is the air-launched cruise missile that they put on B-52s. And then they had those back there. This is Harpoon. This is Harm. This is the high-speed anti-radiation missile, which we use. They've got a newer version of it now called Arkham. It looks almost exactly the same. And we just used a bunch of them down in Yemen, believe it or not, with great success. I can't remember what Arkham. Advanced. It was like advanced anti-radiation air-to-ground missile or something like that. Man, I've refueled a lot of these. My first base of assignment was Strategic Air Command. We had FB-111s, which was the nuclear version of this. And man, does this thing move fast. When you have the wing swept back like that, and this thing's in full power, there was nothing that could catch it. It was even faster than the 105s. It was an amazing airplane. And this was the primary bomber, precision bomber, during Desert Storm. Now this is an E model, this isn't an F model. The F model had the paved tack pod in the center line. That was the IR targeting pod that they used to drop those laser guided bombs with.
And they pitched it to the Navy, and the Navy said it was too heavy for a carrier.
Yeah, they had them on A6s for a while, but then they said no.
Stop talking about the F-111s.
Oh yeah, the F-111s, you're right. It was made to, you know, McNamara going, oh, let's get the same fighters going here. And it's like, no.
Turns out that one size fits none is one size fits none.
Yeah, exactly. But this would fit, and of course this one. In December 1965, my uncle, Bob Jeffrey, took off an F-4C Phantom like this one on his very first combat mission. He has a patch, and everybody's seen the Vietnam patch, 100 missions. This says 1/2 mission. He got shot down on his very first mission, was taken prisoner of war. He was a prisoner of war for 7 years. After flying this airplane. Yeah, I got shot down on his very first mission by a Russian. The Russian guy came to see him, brought his helmet to him. Here's the D model version over here. This one, the D model is like this, shot down a lot of MiGs during the Vietnam War, which we're going to look at here in just a second. Here's the MiG-17 Fresco. This was the main interceptor, you know, that the North Vietnamese were flying. And of course they got the version of the MiG-21 there too. But there was a lot of these shot down over Vietnam. This is a Polish one. But I want you to look at the cockpit. There is virtually no vision out of that cockpit. It sits down low. But the thing about this airplane was it was very maneuverable, very nimble. a lot more nimble than the F-4 and the F-105. And so we lost a lot of F-4s and F-105s to MiG-17s and then, of course, the MiG-21s. But yet they couldn't get by old smart Robin Olds. When I was going through squadron officer school in Alabama, we had to do a paper on somebody famous. Mm-hmm. People were picking like Sun Tzu and Machiavelli and, you know,
the usual suspects.
Lee, Grant Lee. And I said to myself, I'm going to pick somebody I can talk to on a phone. I picked Robin Olds. I went down to the massive library that they had in Maxwell. And sure enough, I found his phone number in like a who's who of aviation history. 303 area code. I went and looked it up, you know, Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And so on a weekend, you know, my wife was with me. We were just newly married. She was actually pregnant with Rachel. And I said, I'm going to call him. And I dialed the number like 2 or 3 times, and you know, and didn't get through it. You know, and I hung up. And then finally, I just let it ring. My wife just said, "Just let it ring." And he picked up on the 3rd ring, and he goes, "Hello," just like that. And of course, I'm shocked and everything. And I said, "Is this Brigadier General Robin Olds?" "Yeah, who wants to know?" I said, "My name is Captain Mark Hasara. I'm currently going through squadron officer school at Maxwell. I'm a KC-135 guy. And we have to do like a hero paper and speech on a famous person. And General, I wanted to pick somebody alive that I could talk to. We don't have to talk right now, but if we can set up a time where we can talk, I'd be so honored and grateful to you." He says, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Nothing, sir." I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm watching the Army-Navy football game." And he was an All-American at tackle at the academy at the North, you know, at West Point. And so I said, "Well, who do you hope wins, sir?" He goes, "I hope they both lose," you know. And he says, "Now, what do you fly again, Captain?" I said, "I'm a KC-135. He goes, and he's silent for like a couple seconds, you know, 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato. And then he says, "I love tanker guys." He says, "Do you have any idea how many times you guys pulled my butt out of the fire?" He says, "Is there something particular you want to talk about?" I said, "Yes, sir. I want to talk about Operation Bolo, and I want to talk about the Tainuan, or how it was pronounced, steel mill." He says, "You have something to write with?" And I said, "I got a full legal pad here and 2 pens." He says, "How much time you got?" I said, "Sir, as much time as you'll give me." Okay? He goes, "Okay, here we go." And he went through every stinking minute detail. Okay? Every stinking detail. Operation Bolo was actually created by a guy who's still alive. The idea. His name is Captain John Beauregard Stone, J.B. Stone. Right? He came up to Robin at the bar on a Friday night and says, "Boss, I got all these MiG-21s here. I got an idea." And J.B. Stone actually drew Bolo out on a napkin on the bar with Robin Olds and Chappie and their weapons officer, a guy named Bill Kirk, sitting next to him. And so he says, "This is a great idea." And they're just focusing on the MiG-21s because they only had like 14 of them, 15 of them. They were just coming online in North Vietnam. Anyway, Robin, being the tactician that he is, sat down with his weapons officers and actually plotted their route of flight based on the radar's sweep. Everything, how fast they're going, everything. They said, "We're going to put a new configuration on it. You know, the ALQ-87 pod we're going to put on so that we can mimic F-105s. He says, you have no idea how painful it was to try to get all those pods. But they did. He took it up to a 3-star general by the name of Momeyer, Spike Momeyer. He said, that man never smiled. Yeah, Robin, what do you want? What does he want to do? Why do you want to do this? All right, tell me how you're going to do it. He said he's literally talking to him. And at first, you know, Momeyer wasn't for it. Then finally, he told him, he says, look, this will be successful. We're going to use surprise. We're going to mask ourselves as F-105s. We're going to use F-105 call signs, routes of flight. Electronically, we're going to mimic F-105s, everything. And at that time period, the only place you could put that stupid ECM pod was on the right outboard pilot, which made it baggage. Okay? It was just baggage. But that's what they had to do. Okay? So they're going up with 2 tanks, 4 Sidewinders, 4 Sparrows, and that stupid pod on the other side. And finally, Momeyer said, okay, do it. And of course, he got the best people, you know, from his wing. He told the other wing, the Da Nang wing, okay, here's what we want you to do. And the weather was bad that day, and they didn't take off. So it was just them. And they get up there, nothing happens. And they said, okay, let's troll. Because there's a complete blanket overcast underneath them. And sure enough, one of the guys looks back and says, here they come. And they get in this big air fight with 7 MiG-21s, and they shoot them all down. And Robin gets one of them. J.B. Stone gets one of them. Ralph Wetterhand gets one of them. Everett T. Raspberry, Raz, he gets one. They shoot down half of the MiG-21s in the North
in a single day.
In a single mission. And so a couple days later, this is like the first week of January of '67. A couple days later, they go, well, let's see if it'll work again. They go up and they do it again, and I think they got like 1 or 2 more. Right? But that's the kind of tactician he was. He was probably, without a doubt, one of the greatest commanders the United States Air Force has ever seen, and probably ever will see. He was a fighter pilot's fighter pilot. His book, Fighter Pilot, which is done by his daughter, is absolutely fabulous. Everybody should read it. And then, of course, we talked about the steel mill raid. And he said, Mark, I came back from Clark Air Base mad and pissed off in the middle of the night. I had to go up and explain to the Air Force, the 13th Air Force commander, why we had lost an F-4 in a training accident. I got airplanes getting shot down over North Vietnam, and they want to grill me about one that was in a training accident. And he said, I came over to scheduling at 2 o'clock in the morning, all mad and pissed off, and I see on the board there's only 1 flight going the next day, and it's a torrential rainstorm. It's a monsoon coming down. You know, I mean, I'm just wet to the bone. And he goes, what's up with everything canceled except for Plymouth flight? I go, boss, it's a raid to the steel mill. We finally got the steel mill on the target list. And he kind of goes, YGBSM, and all of you know what that means. And he kind of opens the door and points outside and goes, in this weather? They go, yeah, boss, they want it done tomorrow. He says, go get Bill Kirk, who is their weapons officer, and another guy. I can't remember the third guy. They only took 3 airplanes. He said, get him in mission planning right now. We got mission plan this right now. Okay. And he hasn't slept, right? Except for he said he slept a little bit on the plane coming over from Clark. And it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. And he gets Bill Kirk out of bed and the other guy. He tells maintenance we're going to go with what we got on the airplanes, which is snake eye, 500-pound high drag bombs. And again, that stupid ECM pod on the right outboard. and they take off in the nasty weather and everything. He says, I was going clock to map to ground, clock to map to ground. He says, you have to remember, Mark, there's areas of our maps that said terrain features unrecognized, or we don't know what they are. He says, I went through a big cloud bank, and he says, it was just pouring in that cloud. I came out the other side, and something in me said, climb. He says, I did. And I came out the other side, and I looked back at Bill Kirk, and we'd just cleared a karst mountaintop by about 200 feet, okay? He says they came across into North Vietnam, and everybody's firing at him. And of course they're looking at him like, where are you guys going? And they go to the steel mill, okay? And they come around, and on his run into the steel mill low, he gets hit really hard. And I think it went through the wing, and one of the gas tanks is leaking. And Bill Kirk says, you know, Lead, you're on fire. And he says, shut up. And he actually said to me, he goes, what did we want me to do? Go out there and piss on it? It was just fuel streaming, okay? It had gone through and punctured one of the wing tanks. And he says, we all lined up. We all dropped on bombs on the blast furnaces. He says, you know, those stupid 500-pound snake eye bombs, but I wasn't going to make my maintenance guys go through the monkey dance of changing out the bombs. And we just went with what we went, okay? And so they drop, they come out, there's flak going off like crazy, everybody's getting hit. He says he could hear the shrapnel bouncing off the airplane, but he's hit really hard and he's damaged pretty good. He says, you know what, Mark? He says, this is why I love tanker guys. A tanker, I started screaming for a tanker, screaming for a tanker. And he says, you always knew when it was an experienced crew and when it was a new crew. The new crews would say, oh, sorry, we got to go home, we're at our bingo. Or an experienced crew would just say, where are you? Where do you need us to come pick him up? And sure enough, they climb up, and he's got gas. He's losing gas. And this experienced tanker crew turns right in front of him, drops the boom, and he literally pulls him back to U-Bahn because the gas that's going into his tanks is also going out that wing. But the tanker literally drags him back to U-Bahn, drops him off, they come in, they land, and he says gas is just pouring out of the airplane as he's taxiing back in. But they blasted the furnaces, you know, and everything. But he says all three airplanes, man, had scratches and marks in it because of what happened. He says they were firing down on us on the hills, right? He said the really funny thing was, Bill Kirk told him after the mission, he was, man, I'd never been that low in a fan of going that fast and everything. And then I looked out over at you, Lee, and you were below me. You know, that's the kind of guy Robin was. So the tanker pumped all of his gas and had to land at U-Bahn. He says, hey, you don't mind if we land here? We're out of gas, okay? We can't go back to Clark. And he told the tanker crew, you land here, and we're going to throw you the biggest party this base has ever seen. And he said he did. He said, Mark, any 135 crew that came into U-Bahn and stayed overnight there never had to buy drinks at the bar. If you said I was a tanker guy and you were wearing a sack patch, okay, and we could tell if it was a B-52 crew or if it was a tanker crew, okay, really quick, all right? But if you were a sack tanker crew and had the sack patch on, you never bought a drink at the bar at the bar.
Oh, in your chapter, your book, where you talk about escorting the FB-111s across the Atlantic, not knowing if you're going to have to dump every single pound of gas that you've got, and say, okay, we're out of the fight, and by the way, we're a big lighter now. The actual SAC procedures for the EVO mission was we would offload to what we called standpipe fuel, which meant you had about 8 minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes of flying time, right? You dumped everything. Fortunately for me, we had FB-111s that weren't going to drain us. But the B-52s would drain 3 tankers right away, you know? And that's how we got the Toad moniker, okay? You know, you're a tanker toad, you're a tanker toad. Toad isn't about a frog. Toad is towing them and die, is what it means, okay? So I spent 2 hours with Robin on the phone. I filled front and back 11 pages of a long
legal pad of notes, which I kept for years, and then finally said, I got to get rid of the paper, and I transcribed it all into a journal that I've kept for long. You know, I've kept a journal since my LDS mission in the 70s, and still have those notes. So when his book came out, you know, and talked about Bolo and it talked about the raid, you know, I had all the inside.
You had a front row seat for it.
I had a front row seat for it because I got it straight from his mouth. Now, Robin Olds was probably one of the best combat leaders the Air Force has ever seen. And many people that flew with him will tell you that. I learned more in 2 hours about leading in combat in that 2 hours with him on the phone than I did in any other class or book I read from then on. Years later in my career, I called him again. He wasn't doing real well. You know, he was having a heart problem. He had congestive heart problem. But he was so excited to talk to me because I called him on the phone. I says, Robin, do you remember that snot-nosed captain that called you from SOS? He goes, yeah, are you him? I go, yeah, I'm him. Okay. And I'm creating the KC-135 Weapons School. I've been asked to create the KC-135 Weapons School. He goes, it's about damn time. And he was so proud of that. Sorry, it's making me a little choked up.
Oh, no. It's
because he was a little choked up too, you know. And we just talked, you know. And I just asked him questions. I said, Robin, you know, all these bombers going down to Berlin getting smacked. He says, Mark, we went to 8th Air Force in 3 spots and said, let us carry 500-pound bombs. We'll go in and take out these things right away, and then we'll go hunt the Luftwaffe and everything like that. And they told us, no, sorry, because all the bomber guys were in the leadership position, and they were not about to let fighter guys outshine them in any way, shape, or form.
That's unfortunate that you get egos and, you know, stuff like that just
really do,
are detrimental to.
Yeah, and that was the thing about Robin too, you know. It wasn't ego, it was confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's a guy that was a double ace in World War II, was a squadron commander as a major. Didn't fly in the Korean War because he's in Europe, but ends up. That's another funny story. He told me too. I said, Robin, how in the world did you end up in U-Bahn? And he starts laughing. Okay, and he says he's in Washington D.C. doing something, and he's arguing about you got to put a gun in the F-4. We don't need guns anymore. It's a missile-only fighting all this. He goes, what are you going to do when you get close in? That's never going to happen. The Cold War, they're all going to, the bears are going to come out and everything. And he's telling him, you got to put a gun in this thing. And this general's arguing with him. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Get out of my office. As a matter of fact, he says, I know just the place for you. I'm sending you to Vietnam, which is exactly why he went into that guy's office, because that's exactly what he wanted to do. I'm going to make you a wing commander at U-Bahn. He says, I went out there with a sad face, got outside the door and went, yes, okay? and then, of course, that's how he got down there, okay? And then the whole mustache story is just fabulous, okay? We still do that in the Air Force. It's called Mustache March, all right? Because that's when a lot of things happened. He did a lot of things in March of '67. And so even now they have what's called Mustache March. And even the women, will go out and get the fake mustaches and put them on because it's to a memorial for Robin, and his leadership and everything. And people grow these big mustaches. Of course, they have to shave them off the end of March, but he grew his mustache kind of as a middle finger to the leadership down there. And all of his guys had these big bushy mustaches. And of course, that spread all throughout Southeast Asia. The 105 guys had mustaches, There's one guy, I think his name is John Piawati, who had a handlebar that went out to here. He would roll it up
to get inside of his mask.
Put it inside of his mask, yeah. Anyway, that's the story of Operation Bolo and what happened to these MiGs. Dude, you're getting lots of stuff here, aren't you?
Yeah, this is amazing. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I appreciate all of the views, your comments, likes, the returning subscribers, and especially when someone has a personal connection to the aircraft and leaves a comment about it. I'd like to also again thank Mark Hasara for his guiding us around the museum, and to the Hill Aerospace Museum for maintaining this collection with such great care.